heads up to folks, and we're going to start the recording now. Next slide, please. So today's training is going to focus on what we, as the Immigrants IRLA campaign, have learned in terms of the advocacy and budget timeline, and to begin this process of why the LA County budget should matter to immigrants. I'm going to pass it to our partners at IRLA, Aaliyah, to tell us a little bit more.
Good morning, everybody, or almost good afternoon. My name is Alia Yousufi. I'm the Senior Policy Coordinator at IRLA, which is the Council on American Islamic Relations. It's the largest Muslim-led civil rights organization in the country, and we're also one of the co-chairs of IRLA and help lead the policy subcommittee. So yeah, why should the LA County budget matter to immigrants? Well, first of all, it's huge. It's $43 billion, which is, a lot more than some countries. And it is a budget that encompasses or should serve 10 million residents that live within LA County. LA County is huge, as you can see from this map. It goes from the Pacific Ocean all the way up to Kern County, which encompasses Palmdale, Lancaster, and beyond, really a huge territory. I think sometimes people just think of LA as the city of LA, but the county is actually much greater than that, and encompass the jurisdiction of the county is actually for the unincorporated areas, which are not the cities within LA County, but the resources and funds that LA County oversees are accessible to anyone living in the county, regardless of whether you live in an unincorporated area or not. But majority of LA County is unincorporated. About 80% of LA County is unincorporated. And then LA County is divided into 5 districts. This is a good question. Do you know your supervisor if you live in LA County? One of those supervisors is your supervisor that is directly accountable to you. They're an elected official, and they get elected every 4 years. They do have a term limit, but they do get elected every 4 years. And so you get to determine when it's their time to be elected or reelected, whether they did a good job regarding, what you expected from them and how your quality of life is within LA County. And then how do decisions about the county budget affect our community? So again, because there's this huge budget and the county oversees 40 different departments across everything from health to social services to the internet access we receive, the budget deeply impacts how we access resources in the county and the types of lives that we live, because it can really cover, a lot of things that you might not think that the county has authority over, like, like I said, how well you can connect to the internet, whether your library has the resources it needs for English language services, or how much the sheriff's budget is, for example. All those things are tied to LA County, and so it's extremely important, and it's why we as IRLA have taken such a strong interest in advocating at the county budget level, because we don't want those decisions being made without our input as to where those funds go. Luce, I think you're on the call. I saw you pop up. I don't know if you wanted to add anything. Luce is with Inclusive Action, who's also a policy co-chair. So I just wanted to give her the opportunity to chime in.
No, I think you covered it all, and I think excited to see to hear about the process. I know that every year, as you may be aware, right, all of you, the county releases a budget, and this budget goes beyond numbers and policies. Like, this budget should really reflect the values that we have as immigrants. And like Alia mentioned, this budget affects our everyday life. The budget includes funding for health services, social safety net programs, among others. So we should see the budget as a moral document that reflects our values as immigrants. But I'll pass it to you, Ali. I think that's all I'll add.
Yeah. And then I'll just also add that, I just love to remind everyone that we interact with that LA County is a county of immigrants, and at least 35% of the county at last count is an immigrant that lives in LA County. And so the budget should pay attention to the needs of immigrants, which are often unique from non-immigrant residents, and should also make greater investments that directly impact immigrant families, which historically it hasn't. Next slide. So here we are at the budget timeline. So in order to effectively influence the budget, we have to understand how the county comes up with this budget of $43 billion. And it's a ongoing process. Every year they go through this. And so there's always an opportunity for us to make our voice heard. But as Daniel will point out later, there are like some key opportunities within the timeline. But that's to say that, it's not to say that you can't advocate at any given time. So there are some key opportunities which we'll be highlighting, but I want people to know that because it's an ongoing process year round, whenever there's something that comes up, there's someone you can talk to or bring up those issues to. But how the county budget gets made is at the beginning of the year, and actually really at the end of the previous year. So starting in December of the previous year and then into January, the county budget department, or the county departments, submit proposed budgets to the CEO. So each department, like I said, there's 40 of them, and analyze what their expenses and staffing changes and all the things that the county plans to roll out in the upcoming year, what those costs are going to be and what they wish they could do in the future fiscal year, and submit that to the CEO in order to begin the budget creation process. Once the departments all submit their budgets, there's an evaluation period from February to March. And that's when the CEO's office puts together all those different budgets and basically creates the overarching LA County budget from those individual department budgets. And then in mid-April, the CEO basically presents that budget to the supervisors, who are the ultimate deciders of whether that budget is going to be approved or not. The CEO has a lot of authority, and the supervisors do put a lot of trust in the CEO to come up with that budget, but the supervisors do influence the budget greatly. And so that's why during this time period, we do tend to meet with the supervisors. And as you may know, we put out our budget letter in order to, at this, evaluation stage, make sure that they're aware of the issues that are important to us and that where we would like the budget to focus on more. And but like I said, after that evaluation period in April, that budget is a recommended budget from the CEO comes out, and the supervisors have an opportunity to study it, and then also for the public to review it as well. And then in that review period in May of the calendar year, you have an opportunity, the board holds public hearings where residents, stakeholders, really anyone in LA County can come and basically comment on what they think of the recommended budget. And then in June, the supervisors will adopt and approve that budget. So the recommended budget, typically in that form that it's presented doesn't change that much between the submission and the adoption period. But then there's this kind of summertime gap where, you know, those May hearings, comments, letters that we submit, conversations that we have during that period get taken into account. And then we get a second bite at the apple in the supplemental budget, which comes out in October. So during this May, June period, and also when the recommended budget comes out, the supervisors also put out unmet needs letters. So in the budget never ever covers everything that we want. You know, typically there's always some deficiencies in the budget. And so those unmet need letters that the supervisors put out after the recommended budget comes out highlight where the budget has fallen short, and they make those acknowledgements of where they think the budget should improve in its future iterations. And so that's where the opportunity for advocacy comes in, for us to harp on some of the things that may have been highlighted in the unmet needs letter. And then if there's things that were not even covered in the unmet needs letter, that we can continue to bring up, like I said, in the period between June and October, so that there's some pressure to include those in the supplemental budget. So then after the supplemental budget comes out, that becomes basically the final adopted budget, because that's really the final opportunity for changes for that fiscal year. And then in November, December, the cycle starts all over again. Any
Thank you
questions?
so much.
Oh yeah.
Yes, Aaliyah. Now that we've heard about the players and the process, let's see if there's any questions about the county budget
Or I think maybe
process.
there's another slide about decision makers, right? Maybe next slide. Yeah.
Oh,
All
my
right. So
apologies.
yeah. Just to review. So, you know, through the budget, you learn that there's leaders of county departments. Those are one of the decision makers. The LA County CEO, who's kind of like, you know, like if you envisioned LA County as a company, that person would be the CEO of LA County, the business, because sometimes the county does operate like a business because there are so many moving parts and employees and whatnot. And then the board is, again, the ultimate oversight of LA County's budget and the elected influencers of it. And so all these people in these different positions have some influence over the budget, and so provides us with a lot of different contact points to try to make our voice heard. All right, I think that's it.
Now, yes, it's time for any questions about the players or the system for the county budget process. I think the previous slide might be good to be on for folks to think of any questions because it has the timeline on it. Thank you, Tessie. All right, let's see. We'll hold any questions on the process.
Anyone have any, you know, I know a couple folks have been doing this IRLA advocacy for the past year now. Are there anything, thoughts, or things that you've learned? Oh, was somebody saying something?
Sorry, that was
Or any thoughts that you all wanted to share about what you've learned about budget advocacy over the past year? Would love to hear anything about that.
all righty then. Well, I'm glad we have it's okay. We may think of questions later, but let's keep sitting with it, and we're gonna now move on to how we can play a role on this advocacy timeline. And we're gonna have Danielle from the Filipino Worker Center guide us through. If we could go to slide 6, I believe. Oh, there it is.
Yeah, so the important thing is like, what are we doing during these time as community organizations who try to work with our communities to make change and to build a budget that works for us, right? And a lot of it is, there's a lot of preparation and a lot of reaction and community engagement all happening around the same time. And what that looks like in each part of the year really, changes. So in October and December, we're coming out of the supplemental budget and we're doing a lot of prep work. We're reaching out to the community to kind of learn, okay, what are our needs going to be for the next year, right? Because we just finished out this year. Let's move into prepping for the next year. We're going to start researching, okay, how does this budget look now that we have all of the information? And we start communicating internally, like what's going to be our strategy next year? What do we want? Uh, this recent 2023, we spent time kind of looking at all the information we had from the 2023 campaign and how that's going to inform the 2024 campaign. So then we enter 2024, January, March, and we finalize and start communicating, what our communities need. We in meetings with champions, and many times is going to be the supervisors. So we get the information together and say, these are what our communities need. These are what we're ready to advocate for, and try to build champions. Supervisors will choose topics that they want to go strong on. And so we start kind of building that partnership for this campaign, right? As community organizations, we always want to be making sure that we are holding them accountable, but we also want to make sure that, when they do want to work with us on the issues, that we're keeping that up, that we're having conversations. And then in April, as was said, the CEO comes out with the recommended budget. So we did all this prep work to kind of try to influence that recommended budget, but now we have that information. So we're going to do reacting. We're going to say, these things are good, these things are bad. We're going to go have those meetings more, work with our partners, the supervisors, and we're also going to take it back to the community. So we're having this kind of, two communications happening. We're working with our champions, communicating what's working, what's not working with them, and going and educating our community to making sure that they're a part of the process and they're learning with us as well. And then as we move into the summer, we're really moving into the finalization of the May, June kind of summer budget. A lot of final decisions are made. So that's when we got to really make those pushes. We've been doing all this work to keep the community involved. And now we're going to get them together and we're going to do actions to make sure that the county knows that we're still here. We've been working with you on all these things. All you have to do is come through on them and give the community what it needs. And that's a lot more of the public stuff, working on different tactics, which we've been talking about with the strategy. And then that will all conclude and we'll figure out how the campaign went with the final budget coming out.
Thank you, Danielle. So any questions about the advocacy timeline or best practices you'd like to share that you've learned in your organization? This is us trying to, collectivize and institutionalize what we've learned in participating in this process, right? We know that you have to get started in October, not when the fiscal year ends in July, right? It's you have to exist by a couple different timelines. So any questions regarding that or best practices folks would like to share?
Not a question, but a comment. As a coalition, I think one of the things that's been interesting about all of this is that we have also been learning more about the process and then pushing out that information to the community. So it's been a learning process throughout, and I think it's a continual thing.
Thank you so much. All righty, let's move on to the next slide. So in continuing to institutionalize this information and share it as widely as possible, Immigrants IRLA, with our communications team, with the help of Tsunu Strategy, is now launching our resource page. So here you'll be able to find reports that give you data on the states of immigrants in LA, what are the issues that are currently showing up for our communities, as well as member resources. So you'll find our one-pagers that outline our demands over the last couple years. And we'll be putting along as well presentations, including this very recording and training we are at today will be added there so that community members and your organizations and organizers can find these readily available. And we're hoping to follow the theme of train the trainer. So we'll provide trainings that we can hopefully then replicate for community as wide reaching as possible. And as you can see here, we're trying to also make sure that these resources are accessible in English, Spanish, and some in Thai. So we'll continue to grow and expand, but the way that we're going to know how to do that is by hearing it from you. So if we can go to the next slide. Now that we've had this discussion today on what the county budget process is, what the advocacy timeline is, and what resources Immigrants IRLA is trying to put together, I would love for us to break out into groups for a quick 10-minute discussion on what are the things that you would need, your organization would need to engage on this advocacy timeline, right? We want to start having conversations with folks and really understand what are the needs that we can, what are the needs that we want to elevate to engage on this timeline, and what other orgs could partner with us, who can we work together to move this advocacy forward. So there's going to be one Immigrants IRLA staff member in each group to just remind us of the conversation, but this is your space. So please, if you can, come on camera, unmute, and be willing to share. And we should be adding you all to the rooms now. All right, let's see. Let me add you all to a room here. Bam. There we go. Everybody got one now. Start with the recording again. All right, welcome back, everybody. I hope those breakout sessions were fruitful and thoughtful. If we could have a couple folks share some of the highlights that y'all discussed in your group, and as a reminder, the question was, what are the things or additional resources we would need to advocate to participate in this advocacy timeline, and any additional partners who we may want to include in this fight with us. What are some highlights folks heard would like to elevate for the group as a whole?
So I can go first. I don't know that we got to the questions actually. We were just having more of like a getting to know each other conversation, but the people that were in my group, we definitely had a lot in common with the advocacy that we're doing on an individual level. For example, Adriana Fonsalva was highlighting the wage theft cases that they have been doing intakes for, and you know, I think fits right in with IRLA's worker justice advocacy that we're going to be doing this year. And then we had a education consultant, Sylvia Juarez, talking about DACA and getting CIGIV visas for students in higher ed settings. And so another opportunity to advocate for a vulnerable group. And you know, wanted to one of the beautiful things about IRLA, just having the space to bring up these advocacy points that people are doing on their individual capacities and seeing where we can support each other.
I was also in Aaliyah's group, and one of the questions that came up, and I think we can probably speak to it a little bit more um, in depth in the larger group, is how we reach out to the community to let them know about this, about what
Yeah.
the county offers, and also about what we as IRLA do.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tessie. Yeah, that is a great question. So one of the ways that we do it is maintaining a newsletter. So IRLA does try to keep our network apprised on what we're doing on a weekly basis. We again do outreach to press and through social media when we're going to do public actions and events, and then through each and every one of you, our network partners, we try to that's how we try to connect and outreach to community members. But if folks have other best practices and ideas, we're also um, more than willing to adapt and include new strategies. That's also came up in my discussion group. One of the things that folks raised up is that a lot of the recent arrivals, especially those of African descent, have a lot of different languages or dialects of the same language. So it's hard to identify the specific resource that's going to reach the most folks, but it's about doing the work, right, of understanding the community so that then we can meet them best. Another flag was a literacy gap. So folks don't know how to read or write, but they may be able to catch something on social media or hear it or on the radio or something like that. So it's just about being accessible and expansive. From my group, I also want to highlight folks shared that one of the things they would want to see is some of the example roles organization can play on the timeline. Some best practices folks shared were listening sessions, hosting listening sessions with their community. And then in terms of partners, folks shared about partnering with like a local church to help receive recent arrivals. So looking in within your community is not just organizations, but it could be a faith-based institution that helps. Tessie?
Yeah, just really quickly, because you spoke to the language access part, we are making a special effort this year because language access is among our policy advocacy, but we're also making a concerted effort to make our materials available in more languages than just English and Spanish. We're moving into, we're actually contracting some of the organizations that are members here, and we are looking to make them into a core set of languages, and then we're going to be trying to expand from there.
So y'all got a sneak peek, but again, yeah, it's all of our work together collectively that makes this possible. So other groups would like to highlight some of the best practices or discussions y'all had in your groups.
Yeah, I can go next. Oh,
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, hopefully my connection is okay. But in our group too, I'm not sure if we were able to exactly get into the meat of the questions, but we did talk about which was kind of discussed a little bit already on how various organizations have their own like expertise in providing services, as well as relationships with different offices and departments. And I think that folks discussed how regarding that the clients that they serve, it would be really good to be more aware of like what these services are amongst like the IRLA coalition, so that we could better like navigate those resources as accordingly. So I think what we're trying to get at in the end is just more networking opportunities so that we could know what each other organization does, and not just providing services, but also like collaborative opportunities in capacity building. Um, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jason. Absolutely resonate with that. Other folks, feel free to drop in some emojis and reactions if y'all agree also.
Yeah, I can share, or anyone from my group want to share. Okay, well, in our group was Salva, ABC, South Asian Network, Somos Familias Valle, and we were talking about our engagements with supervisorial staff and the need to strategize more on how to escalate, especially when a lot of the supervisors don't want to meet with constituents directly and instead defer their staff to meet with groups, right? But we also we recognize the need to also have that one-on-one interaction with supervisors themselves as we're doing the advocacy. And with that, also some comments around like power mapping, right? Like who has influence over what, the escalation. We also talked about engagements with different departments as we are meeting with supervisors, the need to also start talking to departments early on so that our policy priorities are included in the initial stages before the budget is even released. So making sure that we are working on parallel tracks and making sure that we're not only focusing on the supervisors, but the departments. And then we also talked about the overlap that happens when doing budget advocacy. Because the budget advocacy is year-round, right? We're having to not only fight for our priorities to be included in this budget, but we're also having to start planning, like, and looking ahead for what we want for next fiscal year early on. So those were some of the things that came out, and we also specifically talked about some engagements with Supervisor Barger's office, and just like the need of escalating and, the need to have more meaningful engagement with a lot of these offices.
Thank you, Luz. Sylvia, would you like to expand on your comment in the chat?
My message was too large to put in the chat, so I'm breaking it down. But there's an assembly bill that was signed by the governor last year that allocates grant funds for Dreamers Resource Centers at the high school district level. And I'm not sure if this group is familiar to that, but in terms of the spirit of collaboration and dipping into the school districts to better support them at this point is an alternative for those that have ties to school districts. I'll continue to put the message.
Yeah, please do, and I'll add them to the notes. Yeah, I know. I'm sure. I know some of the folks here worked on that bill as well, but that is a great strategy to now incorporate more youth into our immigrant rights and advocacy movement, and also families. I'm sure Parent Engagement Academy would be very excited to help us lead on that front as well. Great. All right, one last comment. Any other folks before we move to the next part? Great. All right, let's get the slides back up again. So now we'll move into the closing. So of course, like any good organizer, next slide we'll move it. We're gonna move into calls to actions. So how is it that we can engage actively right now? So y'all just give us some ideas on how we can adapt and make it more accessible, and we will do that. But right now, the ways that y'all can stay engaged and act with our coalition is subscribing to our newsletter. That's how we're putting out information, current events that are going on in the community to elevate immigrant issues. Through our social media is how we're also promoting not only budget advocacy, but continuing to educate our communities. So please make sure to tap into our social media and feel free to use the information we share out there to distribute among your community members. And then you can feel free to download and share our one pager from our website. Now we have the new Immigrants RLA resource page. So that is for all of you, that is for all the immigrant community here in LA to be able to learn how we can advocate and play a role in the budget process, because it is our tax dollars that they are using to run the county. So we should also be benefiting from these programs. And then most important, last but most importantly, it's participate in person. So we will be showing up to hearings and hosting actions this year. So when you hear about it in our newsletter or social media, please join us. And then now get ready with your phones, because in the next slide, we have a QR code for you to be able to take action right now. So if you scan this code right now, you'll be able to email your supervisor with a script from the Immigrants RLA campaign to help elevate our campaign. The more of us that are out here saying, elevating the needs of our community around housing, language access, worker justice, safety net, then the clearer it'll be for the Board of Supervisors what our community is united behind. So again, remember to follow us on social media and subscribe to the newsletter, but action is most important of all. So scan that QR code and send an email within the last 5 minutes that we got here today, and then your voice will be heard. So thank you all for joining us today. This concludes our Immigrants RLA County budget training on the advocacy timeline as well. And I appreciate you all for dedicating some time